So yeah, you're giving us now this fantastic history and understanding, and then along comes the pandemic, right? And we're all
Mhm.
now talking about a caregiving crisis. We've been talking about federal policy. Can you talk to me specifically about the impact of the pandemic on the debate you're talking about now, on our understanding of what the needs are?
Can you say that a little bit more clearly?
Yes. Can you talk to
Yeah,
us
all right,
about the impact of the pandemic on the debate you're talking about and what our understanding of needs have become through the pandemic?
sure. So I guess I'll start by saying I love and I'm kind of amazed by the ways in which the terms care economy, care work, care crisis are now in the mainstream because they're things that disabled people and people who are caregivers have been talking about for years and years and years. Ask anybody who's somebody in midlife who's, in the sandwich generation, who's taking care of maybe elderly or disabled parents, who's taking care of themselves as a chronically ill person, and who's taking care of kids. They're like, this is not new. But it's been something that, for the most part, has not, because it's a feminized and gendered and racialized and disabled struggle, it's not really broken into mainstream discourse. But now you've got it on the front page of the New York Times. The first time I saw President Biden talking about the care economy, I was like, this is a very different state of affairs than we had very recently. Um, I'm glad that we're talking about it more. I want to echo what Jay and Maria spoke to, which is that as disabled people, we are often still left out of the discourse. We've been talking about this for decades, and caregivers, many of whom are also disabled, have been talking about workers' rights and the need for support for caregivers for decades. And something I want to say is that, echoing what Dave said before, there's a real narrative, I think it was Dave, but in general, there's a real narrative that's really ableist that's like, oh, it's really hard to be a caregiver. It's horrible taking care of my disabled spouse. God, my life is terrible. And I want to flip that and say that caregiving is hard, skilled work. And it doesn't have to be hard. It's hard because we live in an ableist system that either doesn't pay you or deeply underpays and undersupports you for doing that work, and that doesn't respect disabled lives, right? So, but I don't necessarily see that narrative coming up in some of the discussions that are happening right now about the care crisis. And a little bit I'm rolling my eyes because I'm just like, anybody who does housework has known there's been a care crisis for very many long times. And quickly, I just want to drop in a statistic, which is that, because I teach a lot about this, there was a great New York Times article last year that came out. So Maria spoke to the fact that the original funding that was proposed was an additional $400 billion for home and community-based services, and now there's talk of dropping it to $200 billion. Okay, so in 2013, the estimated worth of unpaid care labor in the United States was $470 billion. There's already more. That was almost a decade ago. As of 2020, if women, and this is how the New York Times did it, were paid for the unpaid care work that we do, it would be at minimum wage, it would be $1.5 trillion in the States. So I think
Wow.
what we're seeing too is that, $400 billion is obviously not peanuts. It's a lot of money. But when you actually look, there's a quote that I love that says, care labor is the labor that makes all other labor possible. And I think that's what we're seeing now, is that, like, when all of a sudden, people are walking off the job because they're like, I'm not going to almost die for $7 an hour. When people desperately need care, when we're talking about the ways in which congregate settings have been death traps, and then we look at the dollars and cents of it, we're like, actually, we need a huge move of money from the military industrial complex or other places to the care economy. And 400 billion is a good start, but it actually doesn't go far enough because the need is so deep.